Hi, my name is Beth Oliver, and I'm the dietitian, the registered dietitian at the Clarion Forest Visiting Nurses. And today we're going to make a pizza from scratch. And it's going to be a cheese pizza with an onion topping. And I wanted to emphasize the fact that it is possible to make a pizza that is lower in sodium for all the folks that need to watch their sodium intake. And I know we have many folks out there who do. I do not have the exact nutrition information for the pizza, but I can tell you that I am using no salt added tomato sauce, and that I have reduced the amount of salt in the recipe. It calls for 3/4 teaspoon, and I'm using 1/2 teaspoon today, and I always do when I make my pizzas. I don't like salty crust, as there is salt in the mozzarella cheese, so therefore I do reduce the amount that I use in the preparation of the crust. The recipe I'm using today is a recipe that is on a package of pizza crust yeast, and I just follow the recipe on the back for a 30-minute homemade pizza. If you're not able to get pizza crust yeast, you can always use rapid rise yeast. They're basically the same thing. There are a few different ingredients in the pizza crust recipe, in the pizza crust yeast, versus the quick rise, the rapid rise pizza. And the one thing that it does state on the back of the package is that pizza crust yeast should not be used in bread machines, whereas you can use the rapid rise pizza yeast in a bread machine. So enough for that. The first thing the recipe calls for is 1 cup of flour, and I just use all-purpose white flour. You can also use whole wheat flour or whole wheat white flour. I would advise you, if you use a different kind of flour, that you might want to consider looking at conversions to see if you need to use a little more or a little less. But I'm just using, for the sake of my preparation today, I am just using all-purpose white flour. So the first thing that it tells you to do, and let me review the recipe. First, you use all-purpose flour. You use the pizza crust yeast, as I stated, the sugar, salt, warm water, oil, and then that's it. And then the toppings are additional. The first thing you do is you put a cup of flour into my bowl, and I measured out 1/2 cup of flour and I put it into my bowl. The next thing I want to do is I have the yeast, which is right here in my little prep bowl, and I will dump it into my mixing bowl. Just dump it right in there. And then the next thing I need to do, in addition to throwing in the yeast, I need to put in the sugar and the salt. So I have the salt right here, and as I said, it calls for 3/4 teaspoon of salt, and I just used 1/2 teaspoon of salt instead. And I didn't use kosher salt. If you use kosher salt, because the crystals are bigger, you may have to amend your recipe for the amount of salt. So I'm just going to put my salt in there. And I'm also going to put in my sugar. Now I do want to make a notation about the sugar. The sugar that I use, the recipe calls for 1 1/4 teaspoons of sugar. I have, in my pizza prep, I have started using brown sugar. So the fact that it calls for 1 1/2 teaspoons of sugar, I use 1 teaspoon of brown sugar, and then I use the 1/2 teaspoon of white sugar. So I use both of those. Okay, so those are dumped in. Now, this is the part that gets a little tricky. And the reason it gets a little tricky is because you need to have your water at an appropriate temperature. If your water is not the appropriate temperature, you're going to kill the yeast. Don't get excited about it, but you can. And I measure the temperature of my water. Now, I don't think that the water temperature in my house is set at 120 to 130 degrees. So therefore, I will measure the temperature from this spigot for my water, but I then have to put it in the microwave to get the right temperature. So I'm going to have to go over to the microwave, and so I usually put in more water than I need. And let me just double check myself again here. I need 2/3 of a cup. Okay, so I've got my 2/3 of a cup, and you know when you're measuring water or any kind of fluid, you're supposed to put it on the counter and you're supposed to look to make sure that the bottom here is not wavering. And as you can see on my measuring cup, that it's below, it's 3/4 of a cup. So I'm going to leave it there because I'm going to go into the microwave and I'm going to heat it. My water at this point, I mean this time of year, because it's summertime, the water coming out of the tap is higher than it is, but my water isn't set real high. So I'm going to put it in the microwave a little bit and get it up to temperature. I just pick a minute or 30 seconds, whatever. And then I just check it again. And if it's too hot, you also don't want the water to be too hot because it'll kill the yeast. If it's too low, the yeast won't grow. The sugar and the water are in there because they're the sugar is the food for the yeast, and the water is what hydrates it. But again, like I said, if it's not the right temperature, you're not going to get the right outcome. And I think my water might just be right where I need it to go. And I can't really tell you how long it's going to take to get your water to the temperature you need it because it's all relative to what you started out. And I'm just a tad bit under, so I'm going to heat it for another, not even 10 seconds. Maybe I'll do 10 seconds at that and see what happens. And I just use a thermometer, a meat thermometer. A regular cooking thermometer is what I use to measure my water temperature. And you generally, that can be kind of tricky to find. So I need 2/3 of a cup. Okay, so let's see where we're at with the 2/3 of a cup. I think I'm just a tad bit over. Okay, we're done. So we'll put that in there. And I'll take out my spatula. Now I've got one right here. And it says the next thing I need to do is I need to combine them in the large bowl. Put them in the large bowl and then add the water and the oil. Okay, so I've got the 3 tablespoons of oil. What kind of oil do I use? I use canola oil. I mean, you certainly can use olive oil, but I just use canola oil. So that's pretty easy. And I measured the 3 tablespoons. Okay, so I'm gonna raise my bowl here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, and I've got the mixing paddle on there. don't. Okay. Just put it on there. And I just want to do it for about a minute. I'm going to stop it for a second and scrape down the sides. So I've got my flour down in there. Okay, so there's my minute. And you don't have to use a stand mixer. You can use a hand mixer. I do have a hand mixer. It's just easier to use the stand mixer, but if you only have a hand mixer, that would be fine as well. All right, so now I'm going to gradually add the remaining flour until I get a soft dough is formed, and the dough will be slightly sticky. All right, so I've already put in a cup of flour. The recipe calls for 1 3/4 to 2 1/4 cups of flour. So I'm just going to put the mixer on. I'm just going to put the mixer on. Let me stop it a second so that things don't fly all around. And I'm just going to add some flour. And I'm going to gradually add it in until it gets the consistency that I want. Now, the trick is that now I have to knead my dough. You can manually knead your dough, and you can use a silicone sheet that I have. You can use a silicone sheet, and you can put that on your counter, and you can put flour on it, and then you can just knead your dough. And you need to knead the dough for you need to knead it for about 4 minutes. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to use the dough hook on my mixer. And so I'm going to change the paddle to the dough hook. Okay, there's the dough hook. Okay, so as I said, the recipe says to knead on a floured surface, if needed, until smooth and elastic, about 4 minutes, with floured hands, and dough not to fill, and put it into a greasy, then put it on a greased pizza stone or pizza pan. So I'm going to do mine with my pizza hook, and I'm going to knead it now for about, when you do it with a machine versus doing it manually, you need to do it for about half the time. So I'm going to do mine for about 2 minutes. I think it's just about done. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is shut off my mixer. I'm going to spray I use a pizza stone to make my pizzas. You don't need to use a pizza stone. You can use a cookie sheet that's got the edges on it, or a jelly roll pan, and you can do that, or you can get a round pizza pan. I just happen to use pizza stones because I like them and they work well for me. So there's a non-stick spray on my pizza stone. All right, so here is my dough. Okay, now I put my pizza dough on my stone, and I use a rolling pin. making pizza from scratch is also not that expensive. It's a lot cheaper than buying it. And then you also know what the ingredients are that have gone into the pizza, which I prefer to know what my ingredients are that have gone into my pizza. This sometimes takes a few minutes, as you can see. This is probably the longest part of the prep process, is stretching out the dough. And my pizzas aren't always perfectly round. They vary a little bit. All right, now the next thing I'm going to do is, I should have probably put on my oven. And I should have done that in the very beginning, but I didn't do that, and my oven heats up very quickly. It calls for a 425 degree oven. Now, I have a convection oven, so my convection oven cooks more quickly, bakes more quickly than a conduction oven, which is what the traditional ovens are. I have both settings on my oven. All right, so my no salt added tomato sauce. I wanted to point something out about the no salt added tomato sauce, folks. Looking at the nutrition facts label, which is the label on the back of oil or food products, you go to the word sodium, and many people are on 1,500, 2,500, 2,000 milligrams of sodium diets. There's only 10 milligrams of sodium in the tomato sauce, so it's a very, very low sodium product. And so the no salt added tomato sauce, it comes in small cans, and it's usually even under 50 cents for a small can. So I wanted to point out the no salt added canned tomato sauce that I use. All right, so my oven's on and it's doing its thing. All right, now I'm going to get my tomato sauce out of the refrigerator because I had stuck it there earlier when I fixed my ingredients. So I will take them out. How much sauce do I use? Well, the can is 8 ounces. I don't use the whole can because I don't like my pizzas very watery on top. So I generally use somewhere around 6 ounces. And I just put my sauce on and see how it looks. And I know that that's not very specific. And for those of you who needs things to be specific, I might say to you to use about 6 ounces of sauce. And 6 ounces of sauce is about equivalent to 3/4 of a cup. There's 8 ounces in a cup, so 3/4 of a cup is 6 ounces. So I just put some on and spread it out. Now you can decide what kind of toppings you want to make. I'm just using onions today. I also don't generally, so I think that that's enough sauce on here. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my onions in the microwave. And the reason I'm putting them in the microwave is because I make sure that all my toppings are baked or cooked before I put them on. So I took an onion and I just sliced it down, and you'll see the little sections. Now, how much onion am I using? Well, it depends on how much topping and how much onions and how much you like. So I would say that this is probably a large onion and I'm going to have plenty left. So a small onion probably, and when I talk about a small onion, what the heck's a small onion? A small onion is probably about the size of a tangerine or a small orange. So I'm going to set my microwave for about 1 minute and 30 seconds, and then I will check it while it's heating, while it's cooking. I'll go back in and check it. Now, The mozzarella cheese. What do I do for the mozzarella cheese? Well, I generally use part skim milk mozzarella cheese. And you can get your part skim milk mozzarella cheese. It comes in 8 ounce or 16 ounce packs. For a pizza about this size, you need about an 8 ounce pack. And all I did was slice it in half, slice the cheese down in half, and then sliced it into quarters. But if you'd like, you can grate it. It's up to you. If you'd like to have your cheese grated on your pizza, be my guest, and you can use a pizza grater and grate your cheese. But I prefer mine just cut. So that's what I'm doing. Okay. And I'm going to stop for a minute, and I'm going back to the microwave to check my onions and see how they're doing. Now, if you were going to put green pepper on here, which you certainly could put green pepper on here, no problem. Red pepper, any kind of pepper, fresh pepper, you could also buy frozen peppers and put them on. Only you'd want to make sure you thawed them out and took the water off of them if they were frozen. But you could use any kind of pepper, green pepper, red pepper, yellow peppers. Yellow peppers would be nice. And these are done. I set it for 130, and certainly they're more than done. It was about 110, 120. So I'm just taking my pizza, my onion apart, and I'm putting it on my pizza. Now, you know, some people, only because of the sodium content, I'm not using them today, but also black olives are nice on the pizza. You don't have to do anything with them, but get out the jar of black olives, and here's a jar of black olives. Drain them, maybe cut them in half and put them on your pizza. That's all you have to do. So I'm going to continue putting my onions on my pizza. Some people like to caramelize their onions. How do you caramelize an onion? Well, to caramelize an onion, what you do is you take a skillet. Spray it with nonstick spray or a little bit of oil, and then you saute it around until it turns brown. And the caramelizing is the browning that you get in the skillet. But I just do mine in the microwave because that's my preference, and it's easier than working with the stove. I also sometimes put artichoke hearts on top, and they're always very nice. Again, they can be high in sodium because they oftentimes they come canned. You're going to need to rinse off the sodium. I can't tell you how much you're going to get off, but you will get some off by rinsing it off. And I do not put Romano or Parmesan cheese on my pizza. I generally add that on and just have people put on how much they want at the time of eating. Okay, now the next ingredient that I am using today for a topping is, and again, I don't use meat-based products, is I'm using a smoked apple sage plant-based sausage is what I'm using today. Now, I'm going to tell you that this product is fairly high in sodium. There's 500 milligrams in one link, and that is very high. If you're on a person who's on a low sodium diet, you really want to find things that are under 100 milligrams of sodium to put for toppings. But you're also not going to eat a whole link when you do eat your pizza, because many people are going to eat it with you, so you're not going to eat the whole sausage. And I cooked my sausage ahead of time in my skillet with a non-stick spray until it browned, and this is what it looks like, and I just diced it up. Okay, so I'm going to just put it on for my toppings. And again, I used one link. And I use this in place. The other thing you could use, if you don't mind using meat in your diet and it's going to be very low in sodium, is you could use lean ground beef. You could take a lean ground beef hamburger patty, or just take some lean ground beef, saute it off, drain it very, very well, because you don't want the added fat on top of your pizza because it'll get too greasy. And then you could just put that on top, and as another topping. But peppers go nice, artichoke hearts, onions, whatever vegetables you choose to put on top is fine. Oh, I sometimes also will make a pizza with sliced tomato. When I use sliced tomato, though, I generally don't use as much sauce, because I use sliced tomatoes. And if I'm making a margarita pizza, I will use sliced tomato, and I do not cook it. Put the sliced tomato on top, I put the mozzarella cheese, and I will use fresh basil on. And that's the margarita pizza. Well, my pizza's all made, and now it's time to bake it. My oven's not quite ready yet. I think it is at 425, but I'm gonna wait and bake it in a few minutes. So to round out the meal today, I'm also going to make a salad. These are some sliced peeled carrots that I peeled. I also have spinach, which I cooked. I cook raw spinach on the stove. I use nonstick spray and sometimes a small amount of oil, and then I just saute it for a small amount of time. I put the lid on it. I cook it at about a medium to low heat, and then I take it out. But I cook my vegetables, many of them, in advance, and then I have them ready for salads every night. So I'm putting in some spinach, good source of folic acid, and I'm going to put in, this is just a peeled cucumber, peeled sliced cucumber, and I am also going to put in some beets. Now, these beets are canned beets, and they are high in sodium because they're canned. One thing you can do to reduce the sodium content is you can rinse them off in your colander. You just need to take the colander out, pour them in a colander, rinse them off, and run cold water on them, and that'll reduce the sodium content. And so that would be nice too. So there's my beets. And then the other thing that I oftentimes put on salads are chickpeas. What are chickpeas? Chickpeas are they're a dried, they usually come dry. They're a good source of fiber. They're a bean, and they're a good source of protein. Matter of fact, in 3/4 of a cup, which is 6 ounces, 3/4 of a cup, this is 1 cup, which is 8 ounces, so it's a little less than that. I'm probably only going to use about 1/4 cup, which is this. But 3/4 of a cup of garbanzo beans, as far as fiber, it's 4 grams of fiber, as it states on the label, is about the same, is equivalent to the amount of fiber that's in 4 ounces of oatmeal, or 1/2 cup of oatmeal cooked. So I'm going to put in some chickpeas, or like I said, they're a good source of protein. They're also a good source of protein. In 3/4 of a cup of garbanzo beans, or 7 grams of protein. Well, how do you equate that? Well, about an ounce of meat, which is about 1 by 1 inches, is 7 grams of protein. So it's about equivalent. 3/4 of a cup of garbanzo beans is about 7 grams of protein. And so I'm just going to put in some garbanzo beans. You can also buy them dried, and then you can cook them, and you can use them in soups. You can make dips with them, like hummus, tahini. Actually, you use them to make hummus. The chickpeas are in the hummus. So there's the chickpeas, and then what else am I going to do? Oh, I'm just going to add some salad greens into my salad. And certainly it is less expensive generally to buy your lettuce and wash it and core it. And also, Lettuce is very easy to grow in your garden. You buy some seeds and put them in, and they will grow. It grows very quickly. Okay, so that's my salad for today. It's carrots, cucumbers, spinach, beets, lettuce, and garbanzo beans. And that's your simple salad. And a nice dressing, which is not going to be very high in sodium, is certainly to use vinegar. I use rice wine vinegar, and this is seasoned. It's higher in sodium. You can use unseasoned rice wine vinegar that's going to be lower in sodium, or you certainly can use vinegar, cider vinegar that's going to be low in sodium. And you also, like I said, you can use olive oil, and here's some olive oil. So olive oil and vinegar for a dressing, and if you use the apple cider vinegar or you use the white vinegar, it's going to be very low in sodium. And so that would be a very inexpensive, also it's going to be an inexpensive dressing. Vinegar is very cheap. And also if you buy store brand, even canola oil for your dressing, it's going to be inexpensive. And use some no salt added, some kind of spice, and you will have a lovely salad. So this is a good thing to use as an accompaniment to your pizza.